All right, well, welcome to another tutorial here where we'll just do some lighting exercises and get some really nice, clean, cinematic renders out of Arnold so that we can show off our work real nicely. And, if you're putting together a portfolio of 3D renders, you'll definitely want to make sure your presentation is really, really nice. And that means great lighting, good quality renders. So let's take a look at how to approach that. So for my model here, I've just got this kind of assembly line robot arm that I made. This has got some textures on it. So I can, I guess, with the AI standard surface, and the metalness and the roughness texture on these actually, we're not going to see the albedo in textured mode in the viewport here, but we'll see the textures in just a second when we get some lighting in here. So first things first, let's set up a camera to render from. Right, I'm going to be flying around the 3D scene here using my perspective camera, so we don't want to render from the perspective camera. That would get a bit confusing, trying to, having to line up that camera every time we want to get a nice shot. So I'm going to go ahead and just go right ahead and create a new camera. Let's go panels, perspective, camera 1, and just look through that new camera that I just made. Let's turn on the resolution gate, and just so we can frame up this shot nicely and get a nice shot of this model. Now, this is the point at which you're going to want to pick a final resolution for your render, and then you can render at let's put it this way, you can choose an aspect ratio at this point just to make sure the framing will stay the same regardless of what resolution you render at. I'm going to go to my render settings and let's just make a few decisions here. Let's render as, I'm going to render, okay. Here's what we'll do in this tutorial. We'll take a couple different shots of this same asset, and then we're gonna render this out with an alpha channel, and just so we can do some basic compositing in Photoshop and get this on a different background and everything, kind of combine the images together. So the final image I want to get here is going to be like a 16:9 image, but because I'm gonna be using different renders of the same model on a final 16:9 image, I'm actually going to go for just a square aspect ratio. That will be sufficient, and reduces the number of pixels we actually have to render here with Arnold. Right, might as well make that process as efficient as possible. So I'll go with a 1K square here. We can double that when it comes to taking the final render. Again, we can just keep the resolution reasonable just so that it doesn't take forever for Arnold to get us our test renders. The other thing I'm going to think of at this point of the process is the focal length of this camera. So with the camera selected and over in the attribute editor, looking at the camera shape node, I'm just going to make a slight adjustment here. Again, it totally depends on your model and what you're trying to show off here. I think making this a bit tighter of a shot makes sense. Let's see what 50 millimeters looks like. That, I'm going to go back to 45 just to have a slightly tighter shot than the standard 35 millimeter lens. Just because that's how I want to present the model. Again, you're going to have to make that decision for yourself depending on what you're rendering. So that looks good. That is out of the way. I can go back to my perspective view and that render camera will stay there. Let's also just set some some other basic settings here just to optimize our Arnold, our preview renders so that this is as efficient as possible. I'll just add a quick area light here. We will be using area lights for all the lighting here. I'm just going to add one just so that we can see at least something in the render view. When we take a look, so there's one light. I'm going to load up the kind of the Arnold render view, just this live renderer here, and I'm going to put that. I'm going to put this. Let's see, can we dock that? It's not letting me dock it to the side. Let's put. Oh, there it is. Okay, so dock to the side there, so it's not overlapping the viewport. I can also turn off my. Go into view, I guess it's in window, turn off my display settings to maximize the workspace I have available here. Oh man, gotta love the Maya user interface here. Glitches out every now and then. I can't resize this panel. Let's try again. Wow, it is just not letting me resize the panel. I can resize other panels, but not that one. Fantastic. All right, let's leave it at that. That's good enough for me. All right, I'll just hit play again on the live render so that we can see this updating in real time. We're going to need to adjust the exposure here on this area light just to kind of make the coarse adjustment to its intensity. I meant to type in 8 there. Let's go with 8. That should be a good start. Let's also remember to switch our render camera over to camera shape 1, because that is in fact our render camera. And here, all right. So for the scale of my scene, an exposure of 8 seems to be working for this large area light. That's a good start. Okay, so let's just optimize our render settings for preview purposes. So yeah, so back over to Windows Rendering Editors, Render Settings, over in the Arnold Renderer tab. Let's just make a quick adjustments here. No transmission, no subsurface scattering, and no volume rendering. We can drop those settings down to 0. And from here, we'll do our final optimizations a bit later. We'll take a look and see where the majority of the noise in the render is coming from. But, 2 diffuse and specular samples is a reasonable starting point. We can just use camera AA. If you remember back to that lecture on the Arnold render settings, that camera anti-aliasing setting, kind of giving us a global adjustment of all the other settings, kind of like a global multiplier of all the other settings here. Just for preview purposes, if we're just getting a sense of the lighting, I can leave this at this will be a total of 9 samples. A total of 9 samples per pixel. That should go fairly quickly. And there's some really nasty noise here in these shadowed areas, just showing us where we have not bounced enough additional or taken enough additional pixel samples to resolve the shading in those areas. But this will be a great decision to speed up our test renders. We want to make this go as quick as possible, right? We'll bump this up later, again with some final adjustments to either diffuse or specular. We'll have to see where the majority of the noise in the scene is coming from. Okay, so that is all set up and ready to go. Let's jump into some lighting here. Let's see if I can get rid of that and maximize on my screen real estate for a second here, just as we position some lights. So let's see, the first render I'm going to go for here is a pretty low-key 3-point lighting setup. I'm going to start, well, since this big light is right here, let's go to top view. I'm going to start by just having a nice soft light on this side. I'm going to Control D that to make a duplicate and move that duplicate over to the other side here. I'm going to shrink this area light down just a bit to create a harder light source, just ever so slightly harder. Maybe angle that a little bit, and let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. Okay, let's adjust some intensities. Oh, wow, this is really annoying that I still can't adjust the size of this panel. I guess I should leave my attribute editor open. All right, let's do that. All right, so we can drop the intensity of this. This is going to be our fill light. We can drop that reasonably low, something like that. Our key is already a bit too hard. I'm going to increase the size to soften it ever so slightly and move it off to the side like this. All right, it's kind of working with what I have in mind. I want to see the nice specular highlight on the base area down here and on some of these kind of more reflective material types. And then let's go ahead. I'll do Control D one more time, and let's add in a backlight. I want the majority of the pop from this image and to come from the backlight. So let's zero out the rotations on that just so I get this back kind of flat and pointing down the negative z-axis. Let's go to top view, rotate this. This is going to be a fairly small light source. I want nice hard backlighting. And I'm just going to pause that render for a second. It lags my viewport down like crazy. And let's get this positioned somewhere back here, pretty much pointing towards the camera. I want to get some nice backlighting on right around here. All right, now the intensity is way too high. Way too high, so let's drop that down. Again, understand I'm using intensity as kind of like a fine adjustment to the brightness, and exposure is kind of like your coarse adjustment, really to have the light output from the area light match the scale of your scene. Just have it be appropriate like that. Okay, I think this fill is too bright still. I want a bit more contrast here. As you can see, I'm really just eyeballing this. I have a bit of an idea of the lighting I want to go for, but it is going to take some adjustments. You're not going to get this right off the bat here. But yeah, that is looking pretty good. I might soften the backlight slightly just by increasing its size. There we go. Not half bad. Not half bad. I am liking this. Right, just in case you're curious, that's what it would look like without any fill light. Let's bring that back 1.3, 1.2. Something like that is working. I think that's pretty good. Pretty decent. Again, I'm not going to be super perfectionist on this. If I was making an image set for a portfolio piece or making some materials for a client, I would put a bit more time into this. But let's keep this tutorial time shorter than some of the recent tutorials we've had, and just just make sure we get through what we need to get through today. All right, so that is working for me. Let's go ahead and clean up this noise. Let's adjust. Let's go back to Windows, Rendering Editors, Render Settings, and let's just play with the diffuse and specular shading components separately here. All right, so bringing diffuse up to a fairly high number here, right up to 6 or 7. Is pretty clearly telling us that it's not diffuse shading contributing to most of the noise here. It's either going to be specular or our area light samples, right, creating those soft shadows. Basically, how frequently we're sampling over the area of the light source. So let's try out specular here. Let's just wait for that to render out. So again, not too much of a change. I'm seeing some differences in kind of like this orange area here. That does clean up that noise. It's a fairly reflective dielectric here. But yeah, the majority of the noise is actually being caused by the area lights themselves. So that's good to know. I'm going to leave this as is for a second here. Of course, our camera AA samples are going to clean up, everything or increase the quality of basically everything kind of at the same rate. So I'll leave that at 1 for a second here. I'm going to adjust. I'm going to focus my efforts and adjust the quality, the shading quality being created by these area lights to kind of match the level of noise in the rest of the image. And then we'll increase camera anti-aliasing to get that final high quality level of high quality that we are looking for here. So let's go for, let's go 3 samples on everything. So we can probably keep, maybe the backlight we can keep on 2 samples just because we'll have to watch these specular highlights being created by the backlight, but I think we can get away with fewer samples on those. I'm going to go up to 4. Whoops. I'm going to go up to 4 just to see if that gets me somewhat close to the overall the overall level of noise present in the other areas of the image. We're getting there. I don't know if we're there just yet. Let's preview our 5 or 6 camera AA samples here and see what that does for us. I'm also going to use border rendering, so let's turn that on with this icon right here. And I'm going to focus in on a really noisy area here. So we'll only render out that area just to speed up this process. Okay, so 5 camera anti-aliasing samples is starting to look pretty good. Let's go 6. Looking pretty good to me. So I think that will do the job. Let's move our render region down because, like I said, I did want to watch those specular highlights just to make sure that we do have enough samples on our backlight. You know what? Looks good to me. So I'm going to turn that off. We can pause. We can stop the render there and just make sure everything else is making sense. Have I forgotten anything else? The model itself is still being rendered just as a low, the low resolution geometry cage. Of course, this was rendered in sub D, so I am going to select the root of this, this hierarchy of objects here. I'll select the base, and I'm just going to hit 3. Maya is going to warn me that there's a lot of polygons to subdivide here, but it's fine. My viewport can handle it. So I'm just going to accept that to make sure that we do have smooth proxy turned on here. That's something you definitely don't want to forget if you are working with a sub D asset. And I think we're ready to go for our final render. Oh yeah, resolution. We were gonna bump this up to 2K, right? So let's go back to render, editors, render settings, common, and I'll go with a 2K square here. So that's going to be 2048 by 2048. Okay, camera AA is set to 6, 2 diffuse, 2 specular samples. Okay, looks good. Let's go right ahead and hit that render button. This could take a few minutes, but of course we are increasing the resolution as well. And let's we'll come back when this render has completed. All right, so almost done here. We just need to wait for that progress bar to go away. We need to wait for the word rendering to go away. We need to see a timestamp displayed here and get that final image ready to go. Looks like we're still working on these noisy areas in here. It's kind of fun sometimes to watch just the different areas being cleaned up so you can keep an eye on things. But yeah, no, this is going to be a great looking final render. Zooming in nice and close here to the areas that have been fully rendered. We can see that we have dealt with really all the noticeable noise. You know, from 100%, if I go down to my 1-to-1 ratio here, for all intents and purposes, I mean, I can't see that noise. And any noise left over here, we'd have to look really, really closely, right? So I think maybe if we look really closely in some of these dark areas here where it's just a bit harder to trace our light paths into these areas, we can see a bit more noise. But again, as I said, from the 100% scale here, it really isn't noticeable, right? So you always want to just be thinking about the big picture, right? Like how am I going to be viewing this final image? You know, for what purpose is it going to be used? And you can you know, choose your render settings appropriately, right? So 4 minutes, not bad at all. Let's go ahead and save this out and experiment around with just different ways we can work with transparency and alpha. Now we will be coming back and just doing, again, I think we'll do like 2 other shots just to kind of come full circle here and make this a complete project. But yeah, let's at least get the important stuff out of the way before we do that. All right, so interesting to note here in the Arnold render view, we can actually hit this alpha channel button and see the alpha channel for the asset itself, right? There's nothing in the background here giving us a backdrop, so Arnold considers the background to just be transparent. So that's just fine for us. We'll be adding in our own background in Photoshop. And so yeah, let's go ahead and save 2 different versions here. We can save image, and I'm gonna just go ahead and throw this in my temp folder here. And we can, let's do saving as a PNG and TIFF actually will interpret basically the background as transparency. So the TIFF image format, in fact, let's do that actually. Let's do like render 001 here, and let's save this as .tiff. With PNGs, of course, PNGs can only support transparency, right? They don't support alpha channels. I do want to show what happens with a TIFF, actually, just because it is kind of interesting. Of course, TIFFs can support alpha channels. However, it is quite interesting to note here that when we go ahead and open this up in Photoshop here, so there's render1.tiff, we actually get that background interpreted as transparency. We can head over to channels here and see that there indeed is no alpha channel at all. Yeah, that information has come in as transparency. So I did want to actually show that just because the TIFF file format can support alpha channels, and just so you know what you get if you save that out from Arnold as a TIFF. Now, what we're also going to do here is head back over to Maya, and I'm also going to save this out as a Targa image. So we'll go the same file name .tga, and the Targa image format will be saved with an alpha channel as opposed to transparency. So let's bring that in here. And something that's going to be very interesting to note about how this is brought in here. By the way, we can just head over to channels and see there's that alpha channel, right? So that has been retained with this image. Let's go back to RGB. But what you're going to note with the render saved as a Targa, when we bring it into Photoshop, we are going to be getting some really nasty fringing, some bright fringing on the edges of basically wherever we had those nice anti-aliased semi-transparent pixels, we're going to have some really harsh, disgusting looking fringing. And now this is being caused, of course, by an issue with, whether it's straight alpha or pre-multiplied alpha, and just how Photoshop dealt with that when it imported the image. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I am going to just show this in Premiere. Actually, you can do the same thing in After Effects. Just take any video editing software where you can do some compositing, and we're just because we actually have explicit import options for whether we're interpreting alpha as straight alpha or pre-multiplied alpha. I'm just going to show it in Premiere just to hopefully make a bit more sense. We will fix the problem of that fringing in Photoshop in just a second here, but I did want to show this in Premiere just before we do that. So I will bring in that Targa file and throw that into the timeline here, and we can see that actually let's go ahead. I guess let's go ahead and scale that down just a. Or you know what? Let's leave the scale at 100% because sometimes it's a bit hard to see the fringing. I'm actually going to move it so that, yeah, it was around here, right on this, on this kind of arm component. We saw that really nasty fringing before, so let's take a look at that. And we can see that by default, the fringing is not a problem in Premiere. So what happened? Why is Premiere handling this correctly, but Photoshop is not? Well, as expected, especially if you watched the recent lecture on alpha channels and just how, the differences between straight alpha and pre-multiplied alpha, you might already know the answer. You might already have a suspicion for what happened in Photoshop. But let's take a look at the settings and just see how Premiere has opened up this Targa file. So I'll go ahead, right click on that, go to Modify, and interpret footage. Again, you can do the same thing in After Effects. The setting is just in a slightly different position, but we get the same options available to us. We can see that by default, Premiere is using the pre-multiplication data available in the file itself, which is currently set to straight alpha. We could even set this over to like the manual setting, which just says, conform the alpha pre-multiplication to either pre-multiplied, which would be if we click that box, or not pre-multiplied, otherwise known as straight alpha. So we could even do that and hit OK. It's the same setting, right? So that's just the manual setting for interpreting as straight alpha. All right, so what this is telling us is that the Targa file has saved the transparency, quote unquote, transparency information or what should be opaque and what should be transparent as straight alpha. Let's see what happens. Let's go back, right click, modify, interpret footage. Let's go back and see what happens if we accidentally interpret this alpha channel or interpret this file as having pre-multiplied alpha. And there it is, right? So just by making that mistake and accidentally interpreting this as having pre-multiplied alpha, we can see that Premiere is being like, oh, okay, you've already done that multiplication by the alpha channel. I can just go ahead and do the over operation, slap this onto a black matte, right? That's just the default black Premiere background without taking into account that multiplication by the alpha channel, therefore ending up with this unnatural brightening of the semi-transparent pixels, right? So that's what's happening. That is the problem, and I did just want to show that in Premiere just to make a bit more sense of the situation. So, it's pretty bad when we zoom in here in Photoshop. We can see that basically what happened is when Photoshop brought in the image, it made the mistake of assuming that this image used pre-multiplied alpha. It said, hey, the multiplication by the alpha channel has already been done. I'm just going to go ahead and slap this on a black matte, just the default background color here that we're seeing. And lo and behold, look at that nasty white or bright fringing, this unnatural fringing of the semi-transparent pixels. All that work to path trace all this nice natural anti-aliasing on all these pixels on the edge of the model, and it's all gone to waste. Okay, so we got to fix this. Thankfully, it is not all that hard to do. What we can do is just head over to channels. I'm going to control click on the thumbnail here for the alpha channel to give me a selection for that, basically the white areas or the areas that are actually defined in the alpha channel as being opaque or semi-opaque. So we've got that selection now in Photoshop. I'm going to head back to layers and just make a new mask. I'm just going to go ahead, hit that mask button, and that has just taken the selection that we currently had and created a mask out of the selection. So we can see that our mask that we're using for this layer 0 perfectly matches the alpha channel there. And yeah, so now we can just throw that onto a black background. Oops, that was maybe about 20% gray there. We can throw that on a black background and see that the fringing has been completely done away with. So basically what we did is we kind of undid part of that bad over operation that Photoshop did when it imported the image. And we said, okay, so we're gonna have to go back in here and figure out, like, for each of these semi-transparent pixels, take the information from the alpha channel saying, like, how much of that pixel value do I have to remove based on the alpha value? And then we're just going ahead and masking that right out. So that fixes the problem, and we're back in business here. I just thought it was interesting to show that in light of the recent lecture on straight versus pre-multiplied alpha. All right, and this will yield the same result as just taking either the TIFF or the PNG version of your Arnold render. Again, slapping that onto a black background, right? We get the same result here. So that will work just fine. So we can use either version of this, maybe just for, I don't know, maybe for fun, we'll use the Targa version just because it's a bit more complicated and we have to like mask out each image. It doesn't matter. We can use either one of these for our final composite here, but I will just close those off for the time being. Save a little bit of memory here, as we do have to take a couple more renders. All right, so let's go ahead and do that and finish off this tutorial. I'm going to pick two different camera angles here. Go back to our camera view and let's just show off some different sides Oh yeah, we will want to bring our render settings back to preview mode. Otherwise, this is going to chug. Where was I? Windows, rendering editors, render settings. Back to one camera sample. And again, we're only going to render a 1K square here. Okay, that's way easier to preview here. I'm going to take another shot, just kind of like of the backside, just to get that. All right, so now let's come up with an interesting lighting scenario for this. You know, sometimes what I do when I'm trying to set up an alternative lighting setup, I'll just go ahead, group all of the area lights that I was using in, you know, maybe a 3-ish point lighting setup, and just start rotating those, because just to see what other options we have to work with here. That's kind of interesting. Strong key light from the left-hand side. The other scenario I'm starting to like is, again, strong key from the left side and having that backlight on the right side. So I am really liking this setup here. I think it shows off the silhouette of the object pretty nicely. So let's do some fine-tune adjustments now. Let's head back here. So this is going to be the key. I'll keep that nice and hard. And see, you're gonna have to drop the intensity a little bit. That is totally oversaturating some of those areas there. So let's keep that under control, and then fill in the dark areas with this fill back here. A little bit of a rotation, and looking pretty good. And I don't want too much contribution from this light. In fact, just to make sure that it's not too intrusive, I might actually move it more to the backside like this. I actually like how that is giving me a specular reflection off the backside of that joint there, that kind of elbow joint. All right, pretty decent. And now for the backlight, let's make sure this pops real nicely. I'm going to go for like really, really strong silhouette lighting here. Might back that off a little bit. I'm gonna border render this area just because that's what I'm focusing on. Ooh, I like that. I really like the reflections off basically off the other metallic parts here and actually onto the elbow joint. So I really like that. I like how the light is kind of like wrapping around the object now. Might raise this a bit. And can I get away with a bit? Not too much, because I don't want this to be overexposed down here. Oof, that is getting pretty bright. You gotta watch out that you don't overexpose things. Definitely a sign of an amateur render, and we don't want to do that. I think we're going to have to go for something like this. I'm also going to rotate it so it's not pointing so much at the bottom. And let's work with something like that. All right, again, I won't perfect this like crazy. All right, now here's where we can bend the rules, right? I was initially liking all the backlighting we were receiving on the kind of the front components of this arm. I want to bring those back, but it's not possible with just one area light here. So I'm going to Control D that and take its duplicate closer to the front of the object. I'm going to pause that render. This is lagging out like crazy here. And we will have to work with a lower intensity and have this positioned somewhere. I'm going to have to work with this a bit. I don't really know where to put it. I don't really know, but let's render that out. I will border render just this region and see what we can get going here. All right, so I'm liking that. Let's rotate it so it's pointing back. It's too close. We're going to drop the intensity a bit more. I just want a bit more of a highlight. Again, don't want to overexpose it. Just a bit more of a highlight. Looks good. Maybe this, again, is a bit too close. Turn off border, make sure the whole thing, the rest of it is looking decent. Not bad. Okay, so again, I'm not going to perfect this like crazy. This tutorial is going to be long enough. I can feel it coming. So we will go with that. But hopefully, you know, that helps in just kind of like some of the decision-making process in setting up a light rig like this. So you can, you know, get some ideas on how to approach it. Let's pause everything, do our final changes to, again, make this a production render. I keep opening the wrong window there. We want to go to render settings. Again, we're going to go back to rendering a 2K square and bring this back to 6. It was 6 camera AA samples that we used before. All right, looks good. Let's go ahead, hit render, and wait for that one to complete. And we'll come back when that's done and just finish off the final render. And here we are with the completed render, looking real nice. Looks like the noise is nicely cleaned up there. Let's go ahead and save that off as well. That'll be our second render. And again, I'll use the Targa format just to have some fun with some alpha channels here. And let's finish things off with one final render. One final render. Quickly make this switch back to test render settings. All right, and come up with a different lighting scenario here. So again, a different lighting scenario and camera angle. Maybe we'll do, you know, kind of like a low angle, something like that. Yeah, maybe we'll do it from the other angle so we can see this nice kind of cylinder detail on the other side of the object. All right, I like it. So let's head back here. Our lighting looks horrible. So let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go ahead and select that group again. I'll take that same approach of just kind of rotating this around, seeing if anything, you know, sparks my creativity and gives me some ideas as to how I might approach this. This isn't bad. I like the idea. Again, pretty low-key 3.3-ish point lighting setup. I like the idea of bringing in the key, a pretty hard key light from the side here. Make that a bit taller so that we cover the whole object. And I will also bump up that intensity just a bit. Yeah. Looks like that metal material there is seriously getting overexposed. Let's drop that down. We don't want that to happen. 1.6 maybe. Can we get away with it? Okay, that's not bad. We can also do some color grading on these renders in Photoshop. So if anything, I want to preserve pixel detail in the renders. Still a bit overexposed. 0.2, I guess we're gonna have to do that. If anything, we want flatter lighting in the renders so that we can grade it in Photoshop and do some post-production here, right? You can't fix it in post. You can only improve it in post. If the information is gone, if you overexpose something and the information is gone, it is gone. You ain't never getting that back. So let's bring this fill in and just make sure this isn't too terribly dark. Again, I think that's pretty good as it is. And then we'll just work a little bit with the backlights here. Again, I think what I'm going to do is kind of take the same approach and have this smaller area light angled at the kind of the hand of the robot arm. Try and get some nice backlighting on that. So let's optimize a bit here and border render this. All right, not bad. Just get a nice angle there. Okay, very interesting. I think I can make this work. Not convinced yet. I think that backlight is too close. It is too close. And let's see here. This one, yeah, this one is contributing way too bright of a specular reflection on that. The base, so I'm going to shrink that down, move that, let's see, to the back. This is a bit better here. Again, just trying to think of a good lighting scenario. That is decent. Again, we just want to avoid the overexposure there. Not half bad. Yeah, it's pretty washed out there. Let's just try and deal with that overexposure. Let's see, what is contributing to that? It's not this light. Is it this one? And is it entirely this light? Sometimes when you get too many lights in your scene, yeah, it's all that one. Sometimes when you get too many lights in, then it is difficult to figure out what is giving you a problem. 1.5, is that okay? And something we can do is turn on the display settings again, and I think under, yeah, pixel here, we can hover over areas and just check the RGB values listed just under the RGB column here. Yeah, so some of them are over a value of 1. That is overexposed. I want to make sure that is not the case. I'm going to have to keep this Maybe something like this. I think we are going to have to limit it. Something like that. Okay. There it is. All right. We can always brighten this up in Photoshop, make it more contrasty, kind of bring out those nice bright highlights a bit more, but we can't get pixel data back if it is just pure white clamped out to a value of white. All right, so we'll go with that. Let us hit stop on that render. Set this up for one final render here. 2K square for the resolution. Camera AA is 6. And I'll see you all back when this render completes. All right, and with that final image rendered out here, looks nice. Looks really nice. Doesn't seem... hopefully we don't have any overexposure issues here. Again, you can always check using that display, the display settings window, and see what the RGB values are. But we're going to save this off. One last image. This is going to be our third render. Again, I'll save it as a targa just so we can have fun with the alpha channels ourselves. And yeah, we'll call it a day in Maya for the time being and just work from here on out in Photoshop. And so what we're going to need to do is actually first get rid of or get the masks on each of these images, right? So let's just grab those. Let's bring them in here into Photoshop. We will need to begin by isolating the opaque pixels on their background. So I'll just go ahead and add in a mask for each one. So control click on the alpha channel, add a mask. Pretty straightforward. Control click and add that mask. And well, now we will have the individual layers ready to work with when we bring them over to another another image. All right, so I'm gonna make, let's see, I mean, we rendered out nice big images here. I'll go with 1920 by 1080 pixels, just our standard HD resolution, and let's drag and drop that over. And of course, this is pretty large, so I'm just going to scale this down so it fits. I'm just going to try and eyeball where the other robot arms are going to go. We will have something like this. All right, let's just eyeball that. Again, drag and drop this one over. The alpha channels would not be preserved if we, brought all the targets into a single file. So that's why we had to do that separately. Let's throw that one right over there and drag and drop this last one in. I'll just try and get those bases lined up nicely and make the scales the same. There we go. Lots of room to work with. Maybe that one should go in the middle and this one should go to this way. There we go. I like that better. This one looks a little bit unnaturally large, so just do something like that. Now eyeball these into a decent looking composition. All right, so this is a nice spread just showing off the asset. All right. Looks pretty good. Oh my goodness, I'm such a perfectionist. Got to stop it. Okay, there we go. There we go. Now let's throw in a nice background here. We'll just go with a nice gray gradient. Bring up that gradient tool. do something like this. Does that look decent? Okay. And all right, looks good. Looks good. Let's finish it off with, let's just put a nice border around this. Let's go turn off that fill. Go with a white stroke. Just finish this off, make it all look all nice and professional. All right. Give it a title, again, nice and non-obtrusive. All right, get that nice and centered there. And we should be good to go pretty soon here. I'll just date this and put my name at the bottom. All right, so here we are finishing off a nice piece of work. Keep in mind, when applying for jobs in this sort of field, if you're doing any sort of design work, presentation is key. You want to stand out from everyone else with your work, looking as good as possible. And you know, remember, like, even if you're just applying for a modeling job or texturing job, the presentation of the piece is still going to be hugely important. Even if you are not a lighting artist. I am not a lighting artist, but you still have to do the work. You still have to present your pieces very nicely. Otherwise, you will not stand out in the competition. All right, so I'm going to sign my name here. Put that off to the side, nice and non-obtrusive. Put the date on the other side. And that'll be it for this tutorial. Hopefully that was useful. See, it is currently April 3rd, 2021. Hopefully that was valuable. And yeah, make sure that your hard work is always shown as good as possible, and that you're dealing with the technical parts of these processes correctly. Even if it comes down to something as simple as like straight alpha versus pre-multiplied alpha, it's very important to have a technical understanding of how they work and how to work with them, and how to get how to get your images behaving correctly, right? That would be, one of the worst mistakes you could make in presenting your work in an artistic field, but still a rather technical field as well. You want to be definitely aware of all those details and make sure that you're doing stuff correctly. All right, so there it is. There's our asset. There's adding a custom background in Photoshop, working with alpha channels, and just seeing how to polish off a finished piece here and make a nice spread to show off your work. All right, good luck with the rest of your studies in computer graphics or whatever else you might be into and might be interested in learning. All right, good luck, everyone.